Hey guys, this is Ben with Tilmor, and today we're going to look at adjusting the shifter and looking at a couple areas if you feel like the shifting is not smooth on your tractor. But before we get started, we're going to want to disconnect the battery and set your parking brake. Make sure you're on a good flat surface though to do this, because we are going to have to disengage the parking brake and then we'll reset it. So first we'll go ahead and pull the seat forward. The next is we're going to take a 3/4 and 11/16 wrench and remove the shifter. Basically they'll stack on top of each other like this. The 3/4 is going to grab the jam nut and the 11/16 is going to be under that. So we'll put the 11/16 on and the 3/4 on top of it. Go ahead and break the jam nut loose. And once that's broke loose, the shifter should just thread out of there. We are going to need to reinstall that, so don't put it too far away. Next, we're going to remove this cover here. And to do that, there's 2 bolts in the front, 1 bolt under here, and a bolt back here. This bolt back here has a nut down underneath, so maybe stick your fingers under there to catch it so you don't lose it. This one is tucked back under here. All right, and after you get the 4 bolts removed, go ahead and, hold on, that's, all right, after you get all 4 bolts removed, go ahead and release your parking brake, and then you'll be able to slide it out and you'll actually bring the shield out here. So. Alrighty, now that we got the shield out, go ahead and re-engage your parking brake. And now that we got to this step, we're actually going to go over to a transmission 2-speed assembly that is already outside of the tractor so that I can more clearly show you the points to look for. Basically, if you're sitting in the seat, this is going to be on your right side. Here's your shifter, here's your high-low. This is on your left side. This is all under shields. This is where the belts ride. Just a little bit of a reference so you guys understand what we're looking at. This is the back side of the tractor and this is the front side of the tractor. So what we're going for here is the tolerances are pretty tight, and if there's a little bit of adjustment one way or the other, we're finding that we're seeing some areas that are making contact. And if we got the adjustment just a little bit off when we're shifting, this shifter is actually making contact with that red cover and potentially not allowing it to go completely into gear, and it's popping out. We've had some concerns about that, so I'm going to go through and show you how to adjust it. And the ultimate goal in the end is to get this shifter completely vertical. We can adjust it left and right and forward and backwards, so you want to try to get it as centered in that red cover and as close to perfectly vertical as possible. So let's go ahead and I'll demonstrate how to adjust it. This rod here, we're calling it, it's rod number 1, and this rod adjusts it forward and back. This one's pretty simple to adjust. Basically all you're going to need is a 7/16 and a 1/2 inch wrench. The 7/16 is to hold the flat on the heim joint, and then you just break the nut loose, and just like that. So you'll find out that there's left-handed thread and right-handed thread, so they both go the same way, and it allows us to be able to adjust it without removing a heim joint. So break both nuts loose, and you just turn the rod to adjust it one way or the other. And once you've reached what you feel like is vertical forward and backward, you'll go ahead and just lock those nuts down. And once again, just hold the heim joint. And lock those nuts in place. So once you have those locked in place, what we have found, and it's not going to be exactly 4 inches, but what we have found, if you have those nuts locked in place, the measurement between these two nuts should be roughly 4 inches. If you're a long ways off of 4 inches, then there's probably an adjustment issue. So basically, this is how we measure it. We just push it up against that nut, and as you see, this one is a little bit less than 4 inches, but we're shooting for about 4 inches. So, so that's the first one, and that one adjusts it forward and back. And rod number 2 is this one right here. That is actually this assembly. There's 2 things we're actually going to be looking at on this, but that is how it sits in there, just like that. We call that rod number 2. That, when you lengthen this or shorten this, it adjusts it left and right. When once again, you want it as close to perfectly vertical as possible. So let's go over adjusting that one. First thing that you're going to want to do before you remove anything is go ahead and break that jam nut loose. And once that's broke loose, you're actually going to need to remove this bolt here. And once you get that bolt removed, then you can take and you can thread this heim joint in to make the rod shorter, or thread the heim joint out to make the rod longer. And both move it, they'll move it left or right. And then when you feel like you're where it needs to be, you just go ahead and bolt it back on and tighten that jam nut up. So once again, rod number 1, you want 4 inches, roughly 4 inches in between, and that adjusts it forward and back. This is rod number 2, and I have a measurement for that one as well, but that one adjusts it left to right. The measurement for rod number 2 is 2 7/8 of an inch, and how we measure that one is basically center to center. So I like to put a bolt in there, and then you can put a bolt here, or you can just go in the middle of that heim joint. So hold your tape measure in the center of that one, and you want 2 7/8 to the center of that bolt. So that's where we're getting that measurement from. And we'll go over here so hopefully you guys can get a better view of it. But just go in the middle of that heim joint to the center of the other bolt, and that's 2 7/8. And I think we reference it in something, it's just 2 7/8 center to center. So that's the measurement that you want with rod number 2. Another thing that we have seen, some of these rods are actually flipped 180 degrees. And when they get flipped 180 degrees, this heim joint right here, it makes contact with this rod here. It actually makes contact right back here. So what you want to do is you can easily flip your seat, and if your rod is in like this, you want to just unbolt this bolt, and you can just turn it 180 degrees, and it'll just go right in there like that. So just go ahead and you can check that out. So basically what happens is when you're going over into 3rd gear, the tolerances are tight, and if this heim joint, this rod is in the wrong orientation, it makes contact. So that's one area that you want to check. So check rod number 2, make sure it's oriented right. Another area, I actually painted it red here, is when you're shifting, the end of rod number 1 is coming over here, it could be making contact there. And the way that you want to, basically, you can go through and shift it in the gears. Another way is If you look down there and there's paint chipped off, that means something is coming in contact with it. And the way to fix that is I have a tool. I have to go get that tool though. This is the tool that we're using. Basically, it's just an air-powered die grinder, and it's got a carbide blade or a bit on the end of it. And we're just taking and we're trimming some of that off to give it a little bit more clearance. It could be even close enough that you're indexing the bolt a different way. Just turn the bolt a little bit and it's changing the nut down there so it's not hitting on one of the high points. But if it's got paint chipped off, then obviously something has made contact with it. We'll use that tool again as well. So we have the number 2 rod, we have this area over here. The next area is this bolt here. And some of the gears, when you're shifting, that bolt is coming into contact with the bottom of the shifter. So obviously this one is not, but we have seen some of them come into contact with that. And this can be as easy as removing this bolt and just flipping it 180 degrees. So basically, if the head of the bolt is here, you might need to flip it to the back side. If it's still making contact, you can go ahead and sand some of the bolt down. But you just want to check that and make sure it's not making contact. The next one that we've probably seen the most is this area right here. It's the main shifter assembly, and this one's already cut out. But if you look at your tractor and it's not cut out, it's not got a big rectangle there, it's actually a rounded corner there, you need to check and make sure that's not making contact as well. So when we're coming into 3rd gear, obviously, and this is the bracket that actually holds the acorn nut, that is the bracket that is making contact with the main shifter assembly. So basically go through all your gears and you want to check and make sure that is not making contact. Again, you're going to be able to see paint chipped off, and this one is a little bit more challenging to get cleaned out, but this one is the one that we've probably seen the most with contact. And again, we use the same die grinder with the carbide bit on it. If you don't have that, you might have to get creative. So we did a video about changing the acorn nut, and it might be easier. You can go back and watch that video if you remove some of this stuff to gain more access. So those are a couple things that we've seen. So number 1, start with the adjustment, get that completely vertical. As centered in that hole as you can. Make sure the shifter is not contacting that cover by adjusting number 1 rod here and number 2 rod here. You want to go ahead and you want to check that the number 2 rod is oriented right. You want to check over here and make sure that the number 1 rod is not contacting the main shifter assembly here. You want to make sure this nut is in the right way. And you want to come back here and make sure that this has been cut out, or just check and see if it's making contact. If you get your tractor and you look at it and you're like, hey, mine's not cut out, but it's not hitting, there's no paint chipped, it looks perfectly fine, then you're fine. You don't have to do anything to it. But this video is basically if you feel like your tractor's popping out of gear, you feel like it's not shifting as smoothly as you think it should, check these areas. Now we're back at our tractor, and let's go through and basically go back to reassembling it. First, what you're going to want to do is, after you've made your changes or done all your checks, is remove your shifter here. And let's go ahead and let's put our cover back in. Once again, release your parking brake. Slide that in there. And once you kind of get it slid in, you're going to notice there's a loomed wire down here. This loomed wire maybe will catch the cover, so just kind of fish it out there and it kind of just lays here on the battery cover. But it should all fit in there nice and snug, but if it's catching, hanging up, that's what it's probably hanging up on. So once you get that in there, let's go ahead and let's reset our parking brake. Let's go ahead and put our bolts back in. Once again, I like to start all these bolts by hand. It makes it a lot easier to assemble it and to get the very last bolt started. So remember, you got the two in the front, and then you got this one that's tucked way back in here and hidden. And then the last one has a nut on it. All right, once we got all those started, and it appears to be pretty centered and in the same spot it was when you pulled it off, let's go ahead and tighten them up. Okay, once you get your cover on, what you want to check is this little round piece of steel here. It's actually what controls the light up here on your gauge, but you want to operate your parking brake lever and make sure that is not coming in contact with the cover. So there it's set, and what you want to do is push it and release it, let it come down, and make sure it's not making contact there. Once the cover's on, once you've checked your parking brake lever, we'll just go ahead and we'll put the shifter back on. So the goal is to get the numbers here to be indexed straight. And when we build them, we try to make sure the lock nut is clear up. So you should just be able to take the shifter and twist it clear down on and tighten it up, and it should be aligned. Once again, hold the shifter down here at the bottom with an 11/16 and tighten the jam nut with a 3/4. That's all there is to it. So, and then what you're going to want to do is check and make sure when you're in neutral that you are as close to perfectly vertical as possible, and you're centered in that square. So hopefully this helps. If there's anything else that you guys need help with, please let us know down in the comments. If there's any other videos you want to see, please reach out. We're here to help. We're glad to help. If you guys spotted the hidden salesman in the video, please put down in the comment who you think it was. Thank you guys.